Welcome to the Crypto 101 show, where we dive into the world of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, blockchain, and all the technology with it. Whether you're experienced or a beginner to crypto, our goal is to break down complex concepts and make it easy for you to understand the basics. From Bitcoin to altcoins, we'll cover it all in a way that's easy to digest and provide listeners with the knowledge and understanding they need to make informed decisions and better critical thought. Sit back, relax, and let's simplify your understanding of cryptocurrencies on the Crypto 101 show. Part 2. What happens to social programs in a Bitcoin world? The moral tension between decentralization and the public good. I need to start off by saying this is not financial advice, so if you are looking for that, the show isn't for you. The content of this podcast episode is for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed here are not meant to be taken as financial, investment, or any other advice. Welcome back to the Bitcoin series, a deeper, more honest look at what this technology really means for society, not just for finance. In part 1, we discussed whether Bitcoin is truly policy agnostic and what that means in a world shaped by inflation, debt, and centralized control. But today, we're moving into one of the most important, heavy, and often ignored questions. If Bitcoin replaces the current system, what happens to public services? Education, healthcare, roads, social safety nets. If governments can't print money, how do we fund these things? And more importantly, do we still want to? This episode isn't just about economics, it's about ethics. It's about the moral tension between individual sovereignty and collective care. Because Bitcoin can give us freedom, but it won't guarantee compassion. That's still up to us. So let's get started. Question 1. If governments can't print money, how do we fund education, healthcare, and infrastructure in a Bitcoin world? This is one of the biggest moral questions around Bitcoin, and honestly, the one that keeps a lot of people from ever taking it seriously. In today's world, most public services are funded through some mix of taxes and debt. When that's not enough, governments just print more money. And that's how we paid for wars, stimulus, education programs, roads, bailouts, healthcare, and sometimes, sadly, corruption, which is where the financial system is at the moment. Bitcoin removes the ability to print money. No more emergency stimulus from thin air. No more quantitative easing. And that sounds great when you're thinking about inflation and endless debt. But it also means, where's the funding for schools or clinics? Where's the fixes for roads or disaster relief? How would we actually budget for these types of social programs with Bitcoin? What replaces that power? What replaces that funding? If we choose to want these as a society, how do we make these work? The honest answer, in a Bitcoin-based world, governments or political powers and leaders would still need to tax, but they'd have to be radically more transparent and efficient because they couldn't just print their way out of bad decisions anymore. Governments or political leaders would need visible, traceable tax systems, which likely would have to be automated with smart contracts or open ledgers. Would these have to be tighter and give more local control over budgets? Would they be voluntary or opt-in public good models? Think mutual aid, decentralized funding, DAOs, or decentralized autonomous organization for schools or clinics. Most likely it would have to be accountability by design, not just through elections. While Bitcoin gives you sovereignty and freedom, it doesn't guarantee anyone else a safety net. That means we as a society would have to choose to build new kinds of social support, not rely on top-down models. We would need communities that fund what they value, protocols or rules that reward contribution and care, and cultural shifts where helping others isn't just a policy, it's a principle. And that's where the tension lies. If we still want public goods, education, healthcare, infrastructure, we as a society have to choose to build them from the ground up. Bitcoin provides the rails, but we still decide where the train goes. In other words, code doesn't care about equity. We have to care. So how do we build for that? If Bitcoin replaces fiat and the current system, we don't just need new tools, we would need new values to go with it. This forces us to ask, do we actually care about each other? Or were we just outsourcing the responsibility to broken governments? Let's bridge idealism with realism for a moment. If we want education, healthcare, and safety nets in a Bitcoin world, we can have them, but we have to build them ourselves on purpose, and maybe that's the real opportunity. Bitcoin can't do it alone. It'll take human power, human direction, and a commitment to equity and equality at every level. That's where the work begins, not with code, but with us. Question 2. How would a decentralized system support those who fall behind? This is where Bitcoin's promise of freedom meets one of its biggest criticisms. What happens to the people who can't keep up, who lose their jobs, get sick, get left out, or just don't have the tools to thrive in a decentralized world? Or what about infrastructure, like roads, public transit, or even military and veterans? Because freedom in theory is beautiful, but freedom without support can feel like abandonment. And the current system, for all its flaws, we've built things like unemployment insurance, Medicaid, food assistance, disaster relief, subsidized housing, military and veteran support, and most importantly, education. I'm not saying there isn't an argument or criticism about how well those things work, but at least they exist as a social safety net. In a decentralized system built on Bitcoin, there's no central government printing money to bail people out to cover the gaps. So, what does support look like? Because it's not that we can't support people, it's that we'd have to do it differently. A Bitcoin based system would require bottom up care, not top down control. Would this mean mutual aid networks using BTC or stablecoins, decentralized social insurance protocols? Think community run DAOs that cover emergency needs, smart contracts that auto release support based on need or identity verification, local and digital cooperatives that pool resources for members, or proof of human work systems that reward caregiving, mentoring, or community work. The infrastructure for support doesn't vanish, but it becomes more transparent, more voluntary, and hopefully more responsive to real human needs. But there's still a challenge with this. Decentralization removes coercion, but it also removes the guarantee. There's no central planner forcing everyone to contribute to a safety net. So the question becomes, will we choose to help those who fall behind, even when we don't have to? Do we want stable infrastructure, education, or even a military presence? That's not a question of computer code. That's a question of culture and morals. Bitcoin can create the opportunity, but only we can decide if we'll build a system where people are seen, supported, and protected equally and fairly. Question 3. Can decentralization actually scale social responsibility? So now we get to something a lot of people don't want to talk about, especially in crypto spaces that celebrate individualism. Even if we can build decentralized support systems, can they actually scale? Can mutual aid networks, cooperatives, or DAOs really replace entire national safety nets? Can communities still care for their vulnerable when there's no central system enforcing it? This is where there is tension. Decentralization removes top down control, but scale often requires coordination, trust, and infrastructure. So the question becomes, can decentralization scale social responsibility, or does it collapse when things get too big, too unequal, or too impersonal? What makes scaling hard without centralization? Think about today's society. We're more connected than ever digitally, but often more isolated than ever physically. We don't all share the same values, beliefs, or access and trust in institutions is collapsing. But trust in each other hasn't fully replaced it. So even if we have the tech, will we show up for each other? Will wealthy communities fund roads for poor ones? Will healthy people pay into medical pools they'll never use? Will we care enough to contribute to people we'll never meet? These are human questions, not just technical ones. So what's the path forward? If we want to scale the social responsibility in a Bitcoin world, we may need layered decentralization like small, trusted groups linked together by shared protocols, or transparent social DAOs where funds and outcomes are public, or cultural infrastructure where values that bind communities even without central authority, or identity systems with privacy protections to verify need without exposing people, or even incentives that align care with sustainability, not just profit. Because yes, decentralization removes coercion, but scaling care without coercion, that requires a cultural shift and system designs for empathy, not just efficiency. Decentralization can scale, but only if we choose to scale compassion along with it. Bitcoin doesn't automatically create the world, it just gives us the tools to try. I will end with this. Bitcoin can fund roads, but only we can decide who gets to walk and drive on them. This is where I'll leave it for now, part 2 of the Bitcoin series. Not with a clean answer, but with clearer questions. If Bitcoin really does remove the power to print money, then what do we do to build it in its place? How do we protect each other and not just our wealth? Because roads, schools, clinics, care, military, and veterans, these things still matter. And maybe without inflation, without corruption, without policy being rewritten behind closed doors, we finally get the chance to build them better. But only if we want to, and only if we believe the responsibility to care for others doesn't start at the state, but with us. If Bitcoin becomes the new foundation, then equity, compassion, and access can't be afterthoughts. They have to be built in from block 1. Stay tuned for part 3 of the Bitcoin series, where we explore whether Bitcoin can truly fight corruption or just make it harder to see. Until then, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep asking the questions that matter. I want to be extremely upfront that I try my best to leave all of my opinions out of this. I know this is very condensed and simplified, but I want you to gain your own understanding and beliefs and not be persuaded by me. I hope this helped gain a better grasp of it. Please remember to share, follow, and subscribe to our mailing list and to your favorite podcast app for future episodes so you can gain more with your crypto knowledge. If this sparked something in you or made you question what's possible, I'd love to hear about it. And if you found this valuable, share it, tag someone who needs to hear it, or just sit with it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Crypto 101 Show. If you would like to join our email list, email us at thecrypto101show@gmail.com. For more helpful tips, subscribe in your favorite podcast app and leave a review so that you don't miss our next episode. See you next time.